Dear fellows of the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, esteemed guests here in Stockholm and online, throughout history, engineering sciences have pioneered new tools and previously unimagined solutions, sometimes leading to entirely new worlds. Digitalization is no exception. Borderless communication and instant information access have, during the last half a century, transformed not only our societies and industries, but also our professional and personal lives. Some of the most disruptive discoveries, however, have often resulted in some kind of paradox. Just as a spade can be used to dig ditches or canals as well as to kill someone, digital technologies have proven to be a double-edged sword. We now have knowledge at the slightest movement of our fingertips and the opportunity to feel close to our children and grandchildren on the other side of the planet. But the same technology has drenched the world in disinformation, scams, and election manipulations. We suffer integrity breaches, and we are daily victims of manipulative interaction design, subtly influencing our thoughts and our actions, eroding our very freedoms and human rights. Before governing bodies had even had the time to catch up and regulate the child diseases of these first digital decades, a new era is already dawning upon us. The era of artificial intelligence, possibly even artificial general intelligence or superintelligence. This potent technology holds the promise to augment the human mind with analytical capabilities far stronger than ours. Together with AI, we will be making new scientific discoveries, maybe even solving the grand challenges of our time: climate change, cancer, pandemics. This is the aspiration of the AI optimists. In the midst of these mind-boggling opportunities, there are voices within the global expert community sounding the alarm. To them, the spade metaphor is no longer a perfect fit. The analog tool can be controlled in ways they fear artificial intelligence cannot. One of the more prominent of this group of AI experts is Professor Yoshua Bengio, full professor at the Université de Montréal and founder and scientific director at the Quebec AI Institute. Have we learned from our mistakes so far? Will the positive outcomes outweigh the risks? Google's founders have often repeated an expression encompassing the mixed feelings one might experience when venturing into the unknown. They say, "This is uncomfortably exciting." Appropriate, isn't it? Still, I hope today's seminar will excite you more than it will make you feel uncomfortable. With this said, and with no further ado, please welcome our guest of honor, Yoshua Bengio, with a warm hand.
Thank you. Thanks for the preliminaries. And before I start, I want to say something about something you said about me, that I thought that AI cannot be controlled. Actually, I don't know if it can be controlled. I mean, AI in the future, right now, it can be controlled. AI that could be smarter than us. It's an open question, scientifically speaking. And we have to bite the bullet that it could be one way or the other and think through what that means. So on that, let me share my screen. So my title, AGI-driven loss of democratic control. What it means is we are on a train towards AGI, machines that achieve human competence across many tasks, maybe across the board, and eventually superhuman competence in many areas as well. And so what does that, what are the good things and bad things that could happen? Mostly we're going to talk about the potentially bad scenarios because these are the ones we need to collectively do something about. And loss of democratic control can mean two things. So people, human people, democracies, lose control of very powerful AI systems to a few humans who can abuse that power. That's the number one problem. And the number two problem is we lose control to AI itself and potentially endanger humanity. So there are many other risks that researchers, scholars, and public policy figures are concerned about. But mostly today, I'll be focusing on these extreme risks that become really serious when we reach or surpass human-level intelligence, AGI. Okay, so why should we even think that we could get to human level? Well, scientifically, it's sometimes hard to accept, but we are biological machines. Our brains are biological machines. Unless you think there is something magical going on, and most scientists don't think so. That means there's no reason to think that one day, at least, we couldn't build machines that are at least as smart as us, and potentially smarter. We don't know what the upper limit of intelligence. It's very unlikely that human intelligence is the maximum that can be achieved. The other thing that I'll give you some evidence for is that we're making progress towards that. There are advances that get us closer to AGI. And I think it's time to think about what would that mean, both on the positive and the negatives. Of course, the people who are investing trillions of dollars on AI these days are mostly thinking about the promises. But I think civil society has to think about the perils for the public in general. Here's a figure from a recent paper that we also copied in our international scientific report on the safety of advanced AI. This is a report that I'm chairing and brings together 30 countries plus the EU and UN on trying to synthesize the state of science in AI, in particular regarding risks. So what you see here is the evolution over years of AI systems, the best ones, obviously, according to about 10 benchmarks. And what you can see, of course, on all the different metrics, AI systems are getting better, but also more recently, the slope is sort of accelerating. There also, the other thing you should think about is the black line, the horizontal line, that's human level performance. So on older benchmarks, the AI has pretty much beaten humans. And more recent things that are more advanced, like math and reasoning, we're not there yet. But if you extrapolate, you might think we're just a few years ago. So that raises the question of timeline. When are we going to reach human level? There's a lot of diversity of opinion about this in the scientific community. I mean, of course, there's a trend, but maybe the advances are going to stop. Maybe we're going to hit a roadblock in the research, or maybe it's going to continue at the same rate. If you think about the jump from GPT-2 to GPT-4, which is just a couple of years, it's amazing. And if that continues for another 2-3 years, then we might reach AGI. Most people think it's going to be much more than that, including myself. But really, could be a few years, could be a few decades, could be more. But we need to think about what happens if it's just a few years, I think, so that we can avoid the disruptions. Now, on that road of trying to understand, the first thing we learn is that we don't know much. In particular, we don't know yet how to build AI that will not harm humans. As in, we're pretty sure it won't harm humans. Of course, we could just make a gamble and hope that it doesn't happen. But there are also good arguments that once you have machines that are smarter than us, if they have goals similar to ours, as in self-preservation, as I'll argue later, then we might be in trouble. Even the current systems, we don't understand very well. We don't understand how they come up to their answers. There's also evidence that they use deception sometimes, because it's not surprising humans use it too. It helps to achieve goals. There is a lot of effort, but still a small, too little, but on trying to build safety protections around current systems. The problem is they are very easily bypassed. We also have methods already to start to evaluate the risks, what's called AI evaluations, capability evaluations, but they're not very satisfactory either. They're basically spot checks. If they find a problem, then we know there is one. If they don't find a problem, we don't know if there is or if there isn't. Okay, let me talk about the distinction between AGI, which is usually understood as human level capabilities, and ASI, which is superhuman, superintelligence, artificial superintelligence. So the kind of bad news from a risk perspective is that once we get to AGI, there's a good chance that ASI is not far away. And the reason is that if we have an AI system, it doesn't need to be as good as humans on everything, just as good as the best human AI researchers, the people who are developing the next generation of AI. If we have GPT-6 that is as good as the best AI researchers, then what happens is the speed of progress in AI is going to accelerate very quickly. And the reason is that, any one of these systems, think about GPT-4, you train it, as one big network. But once it's trained, you can get 10,000, 100,000, or even 1 million instances of it. So the reason why GPT-4 can answer, millions of requests at the same time is that it can be parallelized. Right? You can have different computers running different versions of the same program, of course. And so if we have an AI that can do AI research, it's like if you had 100,000 new top AI researchers. So let's say OpenAI would go from a few hundred of these people to essentially 1 million, because also, these systems don't need to sleep. They work 24 hours, 7 days a week. So what would happen? Well, very likely, it's no guarantee, but that would accelerate the advances. And then you have to think that the next generation that's being designed, or the design has been helped by AI, is going to be even better at doing AI research. So that's the recursive self-improvement. And of course, then it can be good not just at AI, but pretty much any task that human can do. So that's one thing we need to worry about. The other thing we need to worry about is how our current societies are dealing with all this. If humanity was just one hive mind, and we would collectively decide to move ahead slowly and cautiously so that we can reap the benefits without destroying ourselves, then everything would be good. The problem is, we have millions of people, billions of people. We have different countries, different corporations, and they compete. And that competition is creating an incentive to accelerate so that you win. You get there before the others, and then you can crush the others with ASI. So that's true for the competition between companies, but it's also true for the competition between countries, which is maybe even more dangerous, because you could imagine governments legislating the competition between companies, forcing companies to behave in some ways that protect the public. But who's gonna regulate the interaction between, say, the US and China? There are also issues that make things worse that have to do with how humans think and human psychology. People, for example, who are working in AI don't want to think of their work as something dangerous. People who are working, not just as scientists, but CEOs of companies that are doing AI, they want to feel good about themselves too. So they'll think they can manage the problem, that they'll do the right thing and the others won't. That's actually what they say. So hubris, defending one's ego, create psychological biases against honest assessment of risk. And so the bottom line is, I feel like humanity is sleepwalking towards a potential catastrophe behind a fog. We don't know what is behind that fog. Maybe it's going to be great. Maybe it's going to be our end. We just don't know. Even the best scientists don't agree on this. So it's truly unknown. What should we do? Okay, yeah, so there's another thing, of course, implicit in what I said just before, which is that AI gives a lot of promises. I mean, there's a reason why all these companies are racing. But there's a way to think about it, which is intelligence gives power. Knowledge gives power. The ability to achieve goals, which is what really AI is about, gives power. It gives power to whoever controls those systems. And so the question is, who decides on the goals? That's why AI can be dual use. Okay, so let's talk now about the loss of human control, and I'll go back to the democratic control later. So how could we build a piece of code that suddenly, doesn't do what we want? How is that even possible? Well, as I said, AI is about reaching goals or answering questions, which is a special kind of goal. So what if an AI had as a goal to preserve itself? Just like every living thing, by the way, on this planet. Well, it means it would resist being turned off. That's it. Then, once you have an AI that doesn't do what we want, we've lost control, at least to some extent. And then, of course, if it is actually smarter than us and it starts controlling things in the real world, like influencing people is the easiest way, then it would act in a way to make sure we can never turn it off, which means it needs to either control us or get rid of us. So how could that self-preservation goal emerge? Well, there are two main paths, two main scenarios. Humans just give that goal to some AIs. And there are people who think that intelligence is more important than anything, and be really willing to, create a sort of new type of entities that are smarter than us to be the stewards of our world and our future. The other way is being studied by researchers in AI safety for a decade as a side effect of the innocuous goals that we may give the AI. The goals of self-preservation and other such goals could emerge. Okay, so how do we deal with this? Well, we need to simultaneously solve two problems. One is scientific and the other is political. The scientific problem is, how do we design AI that's going to be safe and does what we want, that we can control? The political problem is, how do we make sure everyone uses AI in ways that avoid these catastrophes? So both the loss of control to an AI, so human loss of control, and the democratic loss of control. Because even if we solve the scientific problem of building AI that is safe, so in other words, AI remains a kind of tool rather than a new living entity. There's still a problem that humans, at least some humans, will do anything for power. And even, if that means destroying our democratic institutions. You can imagine some people in maybe in a corporation or in a government that use the superintelligence for themselves to grab more power, and maybe initially in a particular country, initially maybe in a particular company, then a particular country, and then potentially create a worldwide dictatorship. That's the upper limit of power grab. So we need to avoid that loss of democratic control. And it seems like a hard problem because, as I said, if we have a superhuman AI somewhere and anybody who controls it can suddenly become super powerful, then how do we avoid that? So we need to put in place governance mechanisms so that no single individual, no single corporation, no single government can have full control over a very powerful AI system. If they do, then nobody can stop them anymore. So this this is something we need to think about. We have democratic institutions. Maybe they need to be improved to become more resilient to the challenges in the future. On the technical side, I've been working on this problem for about a year now, and I think there's hope. I think that we can do research that will help us design AI that will behave well with high probability. So we have a recent paper that is now on arXiv entitled, "Can a Bayesian Oracle Prevent Harm from an Agent?" Where the idea is to construct a guardrail, to use AI itself to prevent bad actions from an AI. So like a guardrail on the road, when the AI proposes to do something, like to output an answer or to act in the world, there's a version of that AI or another AI which calculates just the probability that this action could yield to harm. And of course, we can't calculate that true probability, but we can use mathematics to get what's called an upper bound on that probability. And then we can use that upper bound to decide we're going to reject that action. We not then allow the AI to do something that could be dangerous, even if we're not sure that it will be dangerous. So we create a sort of safety score. And if the AI starts behaving or proposes an action that is above our threshold of our score, then we just prevent that action and force it to do something else. This is my last slide, because it's about the arguments against and for taking AI safety seriously. So I've listed a number of points here. They're all covered in a blog post I made about a month ago. You can find a lot of information about my thoughts regarding AI on my blog, which you'll find easily on the web. And so I've taken all of the arguments that I've heard by people who think that we should not take AI safety seriously, and I've tried to dissect them and look at the both sides of the coin. So, for example, in there you'll find a discussion of why we can't be sure that superhuman AI won't happen or that it won't happen before decades. We simply don't have evidence that's strong enough to reject the possibility that it could happen, or that it could happen, on a short timeline, like 2030 or something. I discuss, what are the arguments that are being brought up by scientists. So if there is a super intelligent AI, there's no guarantee that it will be kind to humans. Of course, we can wish that, or we could try to design it that way, but right now we don't even know how to do it. Another thing that's important in the very short term is what I mentioned earlier about the competitive behavior of corporations and countries, and why that race dynamics is almost certainly going to yield to cutting corners in safety. In fact, it's already happening. There's evidence that companies like OpenAI have been cutting corners. There's a discussion about why controlling a superhuman AI may be challenging, scientifically speaking. Why it is that we shouldn't oppose the current well-known risks, the short-term issues, with the long-term ones, like the catastrophic risks I'll be talking about in this presentation. We need to address both, and they both require government intervention and eventually international treaties. Thinking about treaties, well, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that within our countries, we design safe AIs, but we also need to make sure other countries do something similar. And so we need treaties, and we need those treaties to hold. That means that the conditions compliance will be verifiable. So then I argue against the people who say, well, the genie's out of the bottle, there's nothing to do. Well, no, that's not an acceptable answer because the future is uncertain, is probabilistic. So anything we do now can reduce the probabilities of catastrophic outcomes. We should do, even if we don't have any guarantees that we can, avoid catastrophes. I have a discussion about open source, which is complex, and I can discuss the issue later. I have a discussion about why the situation is different from Pascal's wager, which is one of the arguments people have put forward. And also responding to a recent paper, why we need to act, even though we don't have like quantification of the risks that is objective, like we may have to some extent for climate. We don't have computer models of how AI science would evolve, for example, and that would be required to predict the probabilities of different risk scenarios. All right, I'll stop here. I just mentioned that I've started a project to build this like technical safety guarantees. And if you know people who might be interested, just reach out to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for a very inspiring and thought-triggering intervention, Professor Bengio. We will now proceed with the conversation between Professor Bengio and one of Sweden's most renowned AI experts, my vice chair of the Department of Information Technology here at IVA Fellow, Professor Fredrik Heinz of Linköping University, who is also a former member of the former EU high-level expert group on AI. He will be leading this conversation. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you. I hope you can see me. At least I can see you over there, yes, so it's very nice. I think this is a very interesting situation, and what I would try to do is to ask a bit of questions so that we can get further understanding of your thoughts on these things. So one of the things I wanted to pick up on was that you started your talk by saying that we are on a train towards AGI. Do you believe that this is inevitable and this will, by kind of definition, occur, or do we still have a choice of where we want to, if we want to develop this or not?
We definitely have agency here. Now is the time to take control of the train. The closer we get to AGI, the harder it will get, because AI will become more and more deployed. At least, the kind of very powerful AI that is at the frontier is going to be more and more deployed. When the military starts using it, it's going to be even more difficult to stop that train. So I think now is the time to have the conversation, even if AGI is only in a decade, but it could be shorter.
So following that line, I'm curious about, because you said this, that if we get this powerful, that are at least as powerful as the AI researchers, then the next generation of AI systems will be even more complex. So why wouldn't we want to use that to increase the AI safety? So it seems like the same argument could be made yes. to improve AI safety.
Totally, that's my plan.
Okay, so recursive self-improvement, AI safety.
But the problem is, the problem become kind of political, right? So what do we choose to do? Right? Do we choose to improve the algorithms that give us safety and protect the public in general and democracy? Or do we choose to develop AI that's going to give more power to whoever controls it? These are choices, right? That's, we have agency, but the problem is there are forces. So I wouldn't say that it's unavoidable, but there are forces at play, like basically the forces of competition, which are not naturally steering towards safer behavior, but rather like competitive behavior, like I want to win, I don't trust the other guy, and so on.
So if we could build collaborative and cooperative AI systems rather than competitive, then that would be a potential way forward.
Yes. So one of the things I've written about, I have a paper in the Journal of Democracy that came out about a year ago. And I wrote there that ideally what we do is we shift the frontier AI development from the for-profit commercial kind of base where it is now into a multilateral nonprofit effort geared at benefits for humanity in a way that isn't going to be abused by anybody and whose benefits are going to be shared across the world and across different people, even within each country. Because right now, of course, it's not the direction in which we are, but it is feasible if there's enough political will and public understanding of the risks and the fact that there are alternatives. It's something that we could do.
So I guess this goes back to your argument that the incentives in mainly industry is very focused on this kind of competitive nature, so that should one interpret it as that the systems that we build are similar in nature as the kind of incentives that created them. So by changing the incentives, we also will change the systems that will be developed.
Yes, so we'd like to build AI systems that are more like mothers to us than competitors to us. But if you're thinking about or even like a military use, right? The temptation is to build the next generation of weapons, which is about aggression, not protecting other people. Of course, we may have no choice. So this is not an easy thing. Like if, say, China develops military powerful AI, then what do we do, right? So we have to anticipate those risks and try to prevent them before they happen.
So one, approach that been arguing that if we look at how human society works, individual humans, when we start out many years ago, basically the person with the biggest stick would win the fight. And then as society developed, we have mostly gotten more peaceful and we've gotten more cooperative. We take greater care of more people in society. We have started to reach out and also care more for the nature and the planet and so on and so forth. So it seems as civilization advances, we take more consideration rather than the other way around. So there I'm a little bit curious how you see why wouldn't a very, sophisticated AI system that could really understand the consequences of its actions not take a broader perspective?
It's up to us. That's the thing, right? So that is why I think we need to change the incentive structure. So if the incentive structure is, my company is going to dominate the other companies, or my country is going to dominate the other countries, then your nice picture isn't going to happen. If we have some sort of collective effort at a global level where we decide we're going to actually increase civilization and empathy and solidarity thanks to AI and other tools, then we may be able to bring about amazing well-being and prosperity for humans in coming decades. But that's not going to happen if we don't make sure the other sort of competitive scenarios, happen.
So because my argument was in some sense that humans seems to be mostly competitive, and still we reach this. We still develop mostly positive societies. I can see. So, but maybe the next question would be: so what about how much of the risk is related to humans, and how much, in some sense, is dependent on technology? So what would you say the risks are associated with those two categories?
Well, it's obviously a combination of both. Like, as humans, if we were wise and caring for each other, we would not create a monster that can kill people or everyone, right? We would create tools that help us solve, scientific challenges. So it is the weaknesses of human wisdom and psychology that somehow trigger the appearance of technology that can be dangerous. And then we lose control and it's not in our hands anymore. At least that's a possible scenario. And so then it's the technology that is dangerous. So
of course, argue that AI safety is very important, and I think most people would agree with that, but it seems still to be a difference in what people argue is required to achieve or what they kind of include in AI safety. So, I mean, the organizations saying, oh, yes, of course, we take AI safety very seriously, but still are working towards this. So what are some of the things that either people or organizations that claim to kind of work towards AI safety fail to do? So they are on the kind of surface, they are trying to work towards this, but still it's not enough. What would you say are some of the common mistakes or common things that people fail to take seriously enough?
Yeah, there's a new term, safety washing.
Yes. But I would argue it's not even that it's kind of by design that people are just, I mean, personally, I would say I would really try to build safe systems, but of course that may not be enough. I might not be well informed enough, or I might not put enough resources into it.
So absolutely. I think that there are people who are sincere and think that they're doing the right thing.
Exactly.
Humans are not particularly good at epistemic humility. And we think we're better than others and so on. And so we end up with those situations where, imagine simply the CEO of an AI company thinking, just being, there's a spectrum of beliefs about the AI risks. And let's say that person happens to be on the extreme, like, Yann, LeCun, for example, who thinks that we shouldn't worry. Well, then that person is going to build things, and maybe they're right, and all is going to be good, or maybe we're all going to, be in trouble, and so, and everything in between, of course. The problem is that a lot of decision power is in the hands of individuals who could be anywhere on that spectrum. So that's part of the problem, and then, of course, there are the incentives. I think that's the even greater problem. So long as we don't fix the incentives, we're just going to continue racing towards building dangerous things. There's an analogy that's interesting. It's not exactly the same, but think about designing viruses that could kill everyone. So, of course, it's humans doing the design, but once this thing is released and self-reproduces, because that's what viruses do, we've lost control, including the people who did it. And maybe the people who did it think it's going to be fine. Actually, I'm going to use it to cure some disease or whatever. But once the thing mutates, for example, in the case of viruses, it might turn against the creators of this thing and everyone else. So it's different because, unfortunately, AI is going to be much, much smarter than viruses. But there's a lot of interesting analogies.
So one thing that you also mentioned was this, that we sometimes don't fully understand how these systems work, because it goes back to this epistemic humility, that understanding what we don't understand, and looking at today's AI systems. So would you say it's a technical problem that if we are using the current kind of mainly, say, deep neural networks kind of approaches, that they are in some sense the one part of the reason why it's problematic? Yes. And that, and in that case, what would be the role of more classical, say, symbolic AI, where you can have more formal guarantees about the limits and so on of these systems?
Yeah, so the research program that I've started tries to combine some of the advantages of classical deep learning, which my group contributed to, and sort of classical symbolic AI with reasoning. Because right now, the AI systems based on deep learning, they don't reason very well. It's one of their strongest weakness, their worst weakness, whatever. And so there's this interpretability issue. Like, we don't know how they come to their answers. If they could give us a trustworthy explanation, if we could be sure that they're truthful, to the extent that you can be, and there's a mathematical way to think about truthfulness with uncertainty, which is what's called the Bayesian posterior. So you'd like the AI to give us the probability of some things happening, say harm, given all the context that's available and all the data they've seen. So there's a unique answer to that question. Like mathematically, there's one answer, and giving that answer is the truth, like the probabilistic truth. But we don't know how to do that right now. What I think gives me hope is that instead of making the neural net do the reasoning inside in a way that we can't decipher, we can make the neural net generate in its output the reasoning stream, the arguments. And those arguments can then be checked by simple AI or by humans, or even like simple piece of code that just verifies that the arguments are logical and consistent. And so that would combine the advantages of deep learning. You should think of deep learning like human brains. Like we come up with answers to questions just out of the blue. It's just like our intuition. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. And if I give you not just an answer to your question, but also an argument, and you can check the argument makes sense. Now we're like in a different territory where even though I don't understand how you come up with that demonstration, I don't need to know how you come up with that demonstration. I just need to check that your arguments make sense. And I don't need to be as smart as you, because checking like soundness of an argument is an easy task in comparison to coming up with the arguments in the first place. I don't know if that makes sense.
It sounds a little bit like NP-hard problems, where, I mean, computing the answer is exponential, but when checking the particular answer, verifying that it actually solves a problem is polynomial. But then it seems that there should be a class of problems which could then be characterized in this way, and probably there would be questions that you could ask that would be outside the realm of what could be addressed in this particular way.
That's possible. But we could make the choice to limit ourselves to actions or, proposals from the AI that can be checked for, reasonably checked at least for truthfulness. And the other thing we can do is train the AI so that by construction, the more you train it, the more truthful it gets, which is not how we train them now. But I think it is plausible that we could figure this out in terms of like computer science, machine learning technology.
So taking a step backwards, I mean, one of the things that I find interesting is this concept of agency. And I would argue that today's AI systems lack agency. I mean, from your perspective...
It depends which ones.
What do you mean, which systems or which...
Yes. So like the AlphaGo is actually an agent, but in a very limited environment with a very limited set of pieces of knowledge. That's the rules of Go. But GPT-4 isn't really an agent. You can try to turn it into an agent, but it's not a very good one.
Because they seem to lack this kind of, I mean, you talked about this, self-preservation and so on, that they seem to have very limited notions of anything outside themselves and the particular problem that they're designed to solve. And so it seems to me that it's still some way to go before they have some more deeper form or more significant form of agency.
Well, that's one of the problems that the companies are working hard at, because you can imagine how much money this will be worth. One way to think about this is like this. We have two kinds of AI systems. We have AI systems like AlphaGo that are incredibly good agents, but in a very simple world, where like the rules of Go. And they are superhuman at agency there. And then we have systems like GPT-4 that are incredibly knowledgeable. They know more stuff than any human. And they master language, of course. But it's like they don't have this ability to reason and plan, because planning is like a special kind of reasoning. They don't have this ability to plan with those pieces of knowledge to achieve goals. At least that ability exists, but for now it's very weak. So it's like we have two pieces of the sort of science, and for now people haven't found a way to like have both agency and knowledge. But I can tell you, there's a lot of people in companies working on this.
So I know our time is running short here, but I'm also a little bit curious about the role of legislation in all of this, because we see now several countries around the world trying to find ways through legislation to reduce the risks. So what's your take there? Are the legislative approaches on the right way?
I hope so. So here are two things. Well, first of all, I must say that I've been a witness to incredibly powerful lobbying efforts from mostly a fringe set of people, but who have a lot of power, VCs and other investors in big tech, most of them, not all of them, opposing any legislation. The EU AI Act almost didn't happen. It's just kind of a chance of the negotiation between Germany and France that somehow it ended up working. And it's still, I would say, still at risk of being watered down to the point where it's useless. I've been involved in the discussions around the California Senate Bill 1047, and it's amazing, how much lobbying power came out against this, and the legislature like voted massively in favor. The citizens are like 70% in favor. The tech workers are like over 70% in favor. But there's a good chance the governor will veto because he's under pressure. And he's not an expert, but there are people putting pressure on him, and we don't know what's going to happen. So you can see that there's a battle ongoing. Now, let me talk about what do we want from legislation and AI regulation as far as these catastrophic, because there's a whole spectrum of risks, right? But as far as I guess a lot of the risks. So one of the things, two of the things that I think need to come out of a regulatory system is transparency and incentives. Okay, so let me go into each of them. So transparency is essential. Right now, these companies do whatever they want behind closed doors, and unless there's a whistleblower, we might not know. So we need to increase whistleblower protection. This is a thing that the California bill is doing. And we need to force the companies to render public what are their safety plans. And then if there are some commercial secrets, maybe it's not accessible to everyone, but some authority in California, it's the Attorney General, can still read the redacted parts. So the companies need to say what they're going to be doing in order to protect the public of all the risks. And then what are the results of those tests so that we can check that they are actually doing what they said they would do. So that's the first part, transparency, right? Because, companies don't want to look bad publicly. And so that's going to be, and also sometimes it might just be misguided. Like if their safety plans were something that academics could have access to, then it could criticize and say, oh, look, there's a problem here, and we can fix it. It's not just like a negative thing. It's just to be constructive that we could be all safer if we make that information public. By the way, that includes declaring accidents, which companies usually don't want to do, but it should be forced, and the EU AI Act is going to force them to do that as well. The other thing is incentives. So, as I said, like the current incentives are bad. The competition means cutting corners, hiding information that could be bad for their corporate image, and so on. So we need to change the incentive structure. In one of the issue also, one of the big arguments against legislation is, oh, but regulation is going to hurt innovation, progress, blah, blah, blah. And we don't know how to regulate because we don't understand enough of AI safety. Like, what are the tests that they should be doing, and so on. So there's lots of arguments around this, and there's a reality that the science of AI safety and these evaluations and so on is still very young and is going to mature. And also the misuse is going to mature. I mean, the bad guys are going to figure out ways that we haven't thought about to use AI to their advantage. So we need regulation to be very, very flexible. And the thing that I liked about the California bill is it relies on liability. So liability has, pros and cons, but the thing it does is it doesn't require the regulator to say, well, this is how you should do things in terms of safety. But it says, if you do something that is not reasonable, like that an expert who knows about the state of the art and, the international standards would not do, and, that creates risks, then if there is a catastrophic outcome, you'll be liable. So in this way, you basically let the companies have a self-incentive to act cautiously and to do research on AI safety, because they don't want to be the laggards that they're going to be sued one way or the other, either by the government or a victim of downstream harm.
So it seems that we really need this co-evolution of this kind of AI safety mechanisms, and of course also legislation, that it's not a fixed thing, but something we need to continuously evolve over time.
Absolutely, exactly.
So I would like to thank you very much for this very pleasant conversation. It's nice to be on the asking side rather be on the answering side for once. And of course, I hope that we will get the chance to have further conversations and collaborations also in the future. So with that, I would like to also welcome up Annette again to talk about, or to ask some questions from the audience.
Absolutely. I'm your transmitter here for the questions and answer sections, where we will have picked and choose some questions that you haven't already touched upon in your current discussion. So we have had many topics already, I would say, handled by your conversation. But just to back up a little bit, because you talked a little bit forward-gazing, of course. There's one question here concerning infrastructure of today, and of course it relates to what you were saying about politics and where we're going. But this question is about digital sovereignty, I would say. There's an ongoing discussion here in Sweden and the EU concerning digital sovereignty, whether states should have their own digital infrastructure suited for training and deployment, or if we should rely on companies. And I think you've already in some ways answered this question, but I still wanted to bring it up because it's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give a bit of background before I answer about what I foresee as an unescapable trend, which is as governments realize the power that future AI systems will have, they will want to have more control over that. Right? And regulation is just the first step. There are some people who think eventually they will nationalize all these AI efforts. And I don't know what is the right answer, but it's a plausible direction. Because you don't, as a government, which is, in the democracy represents the people, you don't want to have entities that are like more powerful than you running around without any kind of control. In my Journal of Democracy article, I talk about changing the rules of these companies so that they have a board which isn't just for profit, but includes representatives of government, civil society, and so on. Okay, so in that shift towards the public having more control or more say and more visibility over these AI systems, it's obvious that it means that somehow the public is going to have to build up its own infrastructure, which could be done in collaboration with those companies. I've seen plans, for example, of public-private partnerships between the U.S. government and the leading AI companies in the U.S. So it doesn't have to be like either or. It could be something that, they work together. So, for example, even the electricity infrastructure that's going to be needed for AI in 5 years from now, if we continue on the current trend, is going to be huge. It's going to be something that governments can't just ignore, because, for example, it might have sustainability issues in terms of carbon footprint. It might involve geopolitical, issues. Like, do we put these systems? So there was a proposal by OpenAI to build one of these things in, Saudi Arabia, because there's a lot of energy there. Okay, so you see that there's a lot of geopolitics here about deciding how we're going to build the systems of the future and all the international politics that go around that. And so, yes, I think governments should become major players into this, and with the advantage that we can have academics or nonprofit organizations involved in those efforts, steering the incentives towards something that's more aligned with the public good and reducing the pressure from the competitive, forces that currently are the only ones driving it.
Thank you. And you come back to the theme of the public and the public good, and you mentioned in the beginning also civil society's role in this. One topic that you haven't touched upon is that of literacy. So to be able to take that role that you see that these groups have, be it government or government agencies that should represent the public good, or be it the public directly being involved in these oversight board bodies that you foresee.
Yeah.
Do they have the right competence, and how do we convey AI literacy so that they can take this responsibility?
Yeah, that's one of the things that governments should be doing. It's very obvious for two reasons. Like, even if you only think about the good side of AI, you want your citizens to understand the tools that they're going to be working with, just for professional reasons. Just like we educate our students so that they understand physics, even if they don't become, physicists, AI is going to be, central in our lives in the coming decades, and it's going to be everywhere. And of course, everyone needs to understand the fundamentals of these systems. The other reason is because it's not just that individuals can use AI or not be victims of AI. So if you think about disinformation and so on, but there are also citizens who vote, and we need to take the right collective decisions, and that means understanding the pros and cons and arguments on both sides and all that, and that's a very important part of education in a democracy.
You had the virus metaphor earlier, and we've had other metaphors. Is there how much literacy should the public have? So what level could you make up a metaphor for? I mean, we have the engine. We don't have to understand how the injection engine works to drive the car. Is there any metaphor that comes to your mind when it comes to literacy levels?
Yeah, absolutely. We are building AI systems that have a lot of similarities to human brains. They're different, but we can build on those similarities, being careful to explain also the differences. There's even now a whole branch of research on the psychology of AI, like basically studying AI as we would study other living things that are intelligent, and understanding their biases and how they behave and so on. So I think that there are ways to explain both the benefits and the risks to the general public. In some of my talks, I use animal analogies. Like, you can think of a very powerful AI system like a very powerful animal. Right, so you can think of what can go wrong in your relationship with your pet. Your pet is not as powerful as you, but if instead of a cat you had a grizzly bear, now you have to be careful, right?
Excellent. So we'll take the grisly image with us, and hopefully be able to advance on the Swedish safety. The organization and regulation and everything that we will have to carry with us to find a safe way forward. Some closing words?
No, but I think it's, I mean, what we realize, of course, is that this is a very important issue. And as you say, that means now that we have the chance to do something about it. At the same time, we have this challenge that there is a lot of unknown unknowns, and how do we deal with those? And I think, to me, that's a very interesting question. I mean, how can we act now, even though we don't know exactly what we're trying to prevent or how we're trying to achieve it, but still we need to act, and that's the most important. As you say, we shouldn't be sleepwalking into this, but at least be aware of what we're trying to achieve and to minimize the risks as much as we can.
So from the Royal Academy of Engineering Sciences, I would wish to say thank you to our guest speaker foremost, and I think we should give Professor Bengio a warm hand for his participation. And if I'm correctly informed, we hear that you have several ongoing collaborations with different Swedish stakeholders, so we hope that the next time we will be able to welcome you here in Sweden, so we are able to show some real hospitality. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I also would like to say thank you to our division secretary, Linda Olsson, and the rest of the team here at IVA for preparing this event. So I think we should also give them a hand. And Professor Fredrik Heinz.